Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we have my April TBR. So for April, I am participating in two different readathons. One is one that I will be participating in throughout the year. It's the year-long Pokethon with JD Ray Reads. I'm part of her Patreon. There is another a readathon, happening the first Saturday of April, which I believe is April 2nd. And those are specifically water Pokemon. So I have several books that would fulfill those prompts and help me catch Pokemon. And I'm also participating in a brand new readathon that I found out about because I'm part of JD Ray Reads Patreon, and in there it's called Realmathon. And you pledge your magic to one of the realms. Every book, so there's a list of increasing prompts, so like increasing the magic for your country, and there are four realms, or decreasing the magic for another country. And each of the realms has a different focus. I will get into that once I get to those books. So I have a lot of books specifically for that. I also wanted to make use of my now much more extensive owned TBR, and most of the books that I have for April, they are physical copies that I own and will not have to return to the library. I do have some library books. First off, I'm going to talk about the books that I'm going to read for Pokethon, and it is it's the gym for water Pokemon. I forget the name of it. What I have here, so on each book I have little sticky notes to help me remember what they're going to be for. This one is going to be for Kabuto and Kabutops, which is a broken thing on the cover and a TBR vet. So I'm stretching it a little bit for this one. The broken thing on the cover is this branch right here because it's broken, it's not on the tree. And also I've had all of Tolkien's work, I've wanted to read all of Tolkien's work since I first read Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion. Was this specific title on the TBR? No, but I've wanted to read this for over a decade, so that qualifies it as a TBR vet. So, catching two Pokemons with one book. Next we have the Poliwag Evolution. The middle one is a dance break, so that's not a book. Poliwag is middle grades, so I'm going to read Omar Rising. And Poliwrath, the final one of this evolution, is a book that someone dislikes. I really wanted to read this one for middle grade, so I went on to Goodreads to see if there were any low reviews, and I found a 2-star read. So there's someone who doesn't like this. Although thankfully there's not that many people, but it counts in my book. Next, we have one that I'm not sure that I'm going to get to, and I'm keeping in mind that this is a 24-hour readathon, so I'm trying to stick with shorter books for these. One of them I'm not sure. I'm probably just going to see if a webtoon would count or something, but it is Shelter and Cloister, and one is a comic, and I don't own any, and I realized I just went to the library to pick up a couple of these books, and I could have looked at the comic section, which I meant to, and forgot. Oh well. But so Shelter is a comic, and then Cloister is a graphic novel. And the only graphic novel that I have on my physical TBR right now is the Pride and Prejudice graphic novel that's in Spanish. I will leave this as a maybe. It's short, but as I looked through it, there is a fair amount of text. This is going to be a maybe as far as the TBR goes. And then lastly, for the Pokethon readathon, I have my first Illumicrate book, and that is A River Enchanted. I have been hearing a lot about A River Enchanted, and it's a lot of good things. It's been a book of the month book. It's a fairy loot book with this gorgeous stenciling and sprayed edges and gorgeous cover. It seems like it would appeal to me. I believe it's set in Scotland-ish areas, and there's magic going on and fantasy and etc. I am counting this for the Squirtle evolution, which starts with blue on the cover, and then Wordle, water, and then it's probably a stretch. So I don't know if it fits the final evolution Blastoise, which is a water elemental. It could be it's the River Enchanted, so maybe the river is acting as a being in there. So this is at least 2 Pokemon, but I'm really excited about this book. A little bit more about Realmathon before I get into the other books that I have on my TBR. Now there's a series of, I believe, about 20 prompts for both increasing and decreasing the amount of magic for the realms that border yours. And now I have chosen Iskana, which is a mountainous area with the subgenre of polar fantasy. I've been intrigued by polar fantasy. I haven't read a lot. For each book, you can use up to 5 prompts. You can reuse the prompts as many times as you want. You get bonus points if it's a military fantasy and bonus points if it's the subgenre of the realm that you have chosen. So for, in my case, if it's a military polar fantasy, then I would get 20 bonus points. That being said, I considered going through like with the sticky notes of what prompts that I was going to use it for on each of these, but I decided not to. I think I'm going to have some themed reading vlogs, or at least mention the Realmathon things in the various reading vlogs throughout the month of April, and in those I'll talk about the points that I get. There's also going to be a 48-hour readathon called Peace Talks, where I think all of your points are doubled or increased somehow. The books that I picked up from the library, 2 of them specifically I picked up because they were recommendations from the heads of my realm, and I believe one of them was also a favorite of Cassidy, who is running this whole thing. I'll have everybody linked in the description. In the case of The Bear and the Nightingale, I have had this on my radar for a long time, and I figured, what better opportunity am I going to get than right now? So this, I'll definitely get the bonus points for polar fantasy, but also in a recommendations video that Cassidy put up, she is using this as a stretch to qualify for military fantasy as well, so that's 20 bonus points. So I'll probably aim to read this book during the readathon for even more points. Bear the Nightingale, it centers Russian folklore, and I've heard that it's very lyrical, very slow moving. There's not a lot of plot necessarily, but it is well written. So I'm definitely intrigued, and I want to see if it's something that I want to continue. The next one, Echo North, is one that I know very little about. All I know is that it's a polar fantasy and it comes highly recommended, and I believe it also centers Russian folklore. And then I did an interlibrary loan for A Wolf for a Spell, which is one that I picked up. I don't know if this counts as polar fantasy, but the cover is giving me those sorts of vibes. So definitely going to be seeing if this counts as polar fantasy as well. But this is the last book on the middle grade Goodreads Choice Award list from 2021 that I hadn't read because my library didn't have it. Now I have also requested 2 other books from the library that would fall under the polar fantasy or military fantasy or Cassidy faves. The 2 books that I requested from the library that have not arrived yet are Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. I've heard mixed things about Naomi Novik's writing. Out of all of the books by her that I'm aware of, I've heard the best things about Spinning Silver, but again, Spinning Silver is a polar fantasy, and it's also, I believe, a Rumpelstiltskin retelling of sorts, which has me intrigued. The other one is A Wolf for a Woodsman. I'm probably not remembering the title right. I've got a lot of different wolf books because, you know, polar fantasy. I had that sort of on a TBR, not necessarily, but I believe this one also counts as both polar and military. So I'm going to try to read all of those specifically polar fantasy and military fantasy ones during that weekend readathon, or at least some of them. Now we get to the physical copies. Along those lines, there are bonus points for reading a Cassidy fave, and it just so happens that it goes along with my current mood, and that is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. So I am going to read Elantris this month. Speaking of Brandon Sanderson, I'm also going to read The Well of Ascension. Both Elantris and The Well of Ascension are Cosmere novels. This one is completely separate. He's talked about sequels or other books in this part of the Cosmere, but hasn't written any. This is also, I believe, his first officially published work. So a lot of people recommend reading Elantris before going on to read Stormlight Archive. because as you start off as an author, your earlier works sometimes will pale in comparison to your later works. And then The Well of Ascension picks up after the Final Empire. I will try to give my best thoughts on this as I am reading this, but because I want to avoid spoilers and also because it's the second book in a series, I won't be giving you a lot of plot details on this one. Now, you will have seen all of these other books in my recent Atlanta book haul, but these are the other books that I want to read in the month of April. Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. I figured, let's go ahead and try it. And there was a prompt for Realmathon that says something about getting out of your comfort zone or trying something new, and this sort of speculative sci-fi is definitely something new for me, but I've heard good things about it. And I really wanted to read All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. She is one of my favorites. I hesitate to say that though because I've read only one series, but from people who have read and loved the Ember and the Ashes series like I did and have read this book, they say that it is also amazing. Then I am going to finally finish Homegoing by Yagasi. I started this back when I taught ELA. I think this was back in the 2019-2020 school year. It was a book in my classroom library and has been sitting on my shelves since I brought it home, since we were all shut down that year. And I have read a total of 16 pages in this book, and I just put it down, not because I was disinterested in it or it wasn't working for me. I put it down and forgot about it. This book talks about several generations of a family from, I believe, Ghana, and what happens from them all and the descendants, because there's two sisters, and one chooses to marry this royalty, I believe, in Ghana, and another chooses a different path, but that path leads her or her immediate descendants into slavery. And so you track the family through these two different diverging lines. And so the more I talk about this, the more I'm interested in it. So I have no idea why I put it down to begin with. I'm going to finish a duology. So far, all I've done is finish duologies as far as series completions. Oh, well, I did finish a 5-book series in 1 week. Look at me doubting myself. This is the conclusion to The Wrath and the Dawn duology, so I'm gonna have to get familiar on The Wrath and the Dawn before I read The Rose and the Dagger, but that also helps me complete one of my other goals, which is completing series. Next, we have The War Outside. Again, Monica Hess, auto by author. The two main characters in this, one is German American and one is Japanese, and they both end up in an internment camp. I had no idea that there were any others, like Germans or Italians, that were also put into internment camps during World War II. With the take that Monica Hess has on different historical events, primarily World War II, as I'm noticing, I really appreciate, and it's really hard hitting. So I'm excited to read this. And then one of the other goals that I have is reading nonfiction. So the two nonfiction that I have are The Color of Law. This is a forgotten history of how our government segregated America. So I'm really intrigued about this one. So a lot of this does have to do with property laws, zoning laws, tax exemptions, things like that. How these laws and things physically segregated America. Last of the physical books I have is A Better Life for Their Children, the Rosenwald School. So this will be an easy one to complete and check off the list because it is shorter, although this looks absolutely fantastic. So popping in to say that the day after I filmed my April TBR, I decided to join another readathon. So yeah. So I have been seeing different things about G from Book Roast's Magical Readathon, and it seemed confusing, and I had to read a little bit about it, and so I didn't really participate in it when she first started it. Then I started reading more about it, and then just getting more intrigued, and then she announced the first semester of study, and so I decided to go ahead and do it, even though it's, you know, going right along with the other two readathons that I'm doing this month. Now, one of those readathons is lasting the whole year, and that's Pokethon, but that means that I will have 2 readathons for the month of April with significant enough overlap. So to determine what books I was going to read for the semester 1 and looking at the syllabus, I had to go back and sort of like backfill the path. Now she said you don't have to, but what I did is I went back and I looked at what I had read in the month of September, which is when she had the novice path, so getting there. And then I looked back at what I read the week before I'm doing this, so like the 3rd week of March for the Conduit and the Legacy. So figuring all of that out, I am an archivist. That's my guild. So my guild is an archivist. My calling is an alchemist because I like a challenge. My background is urban. My province is Eartheria. My heritage is human. And my conduit is a spell book. And my legacy is Kovas. What that means is there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 different courses that I have to take for this semester. 7 of those I have lined up with other prompts. So Orgullo Prejuicio is going to be one of them. Omar Rising is going to be another one. All My Rage, Homegoing, Well of Ascension, A Wolf for a Spell, and Elantris. Those are 7 of my 10. So I am adding 3 books to my April TBR. So the 3 books that I have added are Shadow of the Fox. I wanted to read that for a while. I really loved Julie Kagawa's Iron Fae series, and I just read Shinji Takahashi in the Mark of Coatl, which I enjoyed. So I've had Shadow of the Fox on my TBR. That prompt was the word shadow in the title. Then a book under 100 pages. I had 1 book, the one about the schools, 105. I chose The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman. Again, something off my TBR. I used Storygraph's really handy search features to find these. And then the last one was short stories or essays, and I had one on my TBR available at the library that's called The Public Library, a photographic essay. So that'll be a nice quick read. So all 3 of those should be quick reads and easy to handle. So without further ado, I'll throw you back to past Jenny. Now I haven't forgotten about one of my other goals, and that is audiobooks. I have really enjoyed just basically stumbling across audiobooks. I've made a queue of sorts on the different apps that I have access to, and so I just have decided that I'm going to pick up the next one in the list, whatever that may be. Of those, the options that I have given myself are the following. For nonfiction on my Libro FM app, I have Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. I thought for sure that I had already read this, but I think the one that I have already read by her is The Warmth of Other Suns. As I checked all my records, I apparently have not read Cast. I am really intrigued and excited to read that. And then the others are fiction. I have also, in addition to Brandon Sanderson, not read, well, prior to the month of March, I had not read any of Robin Hobb either. Robin Hobb is another really big, well-known, prolific fantasy author that is talked a lot about on the BookTube channels that I watch, and so I have queued up pretty much all of the Realm of the Elderlings books, and there you have it. There's my fairly extensive April TBR. I'm really excited about all of these and participating in the various readathons. It really helped me with making this TBR. I would love to chat with you in the comments about any of these books. Are there books that you have read before and you have thoughts about? Are there books that you are also excited to read? Let me know. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.